Hi, I'm Tom Patterson with Flying. We're talking now with Louis Seno, Chairman Emeritus at Jet Support Services, Inc., the leading independent provider of maintenance support and financial services to the business aviation industry. Thank you, Lou, for taking time to be here. It's a real thrill to talk to you today.
Oh, my pleasure, Tom. Happy to be here.
Our time is relatively short, but first off, we'd love to know a little bit about how your life path led to flying and the aviation industry. How did you get started in flying?
Well, Tom, I grew up in a flying family. My father was a very avid general aviation pilot and a staunch EAA member. We were always building an airplane in the basement as a kid. And virtually ever since I learned to read, we always seemed to have a copy of Flying Magazine around the house. And that hasn't changed.
That's great. So, do you remember that day when you soloed for the first time or when you got your pilot's certificate? What was that like?
Well, I do remember it. It was exciting, and it was over a half a century ago. I soloed in 1966 and got my private in 1967.
Outstanding. So, how did your interest in aviation lead you to JSSI?
Well, great question. When I was about 26 years old, I decided to transition out of the family business and try and make my hobby my living. And here I am 40 years later, and it seemed to work out. But I got involved with a number of entrepreneurs in 1989 to launch this concept, which was around, but not in a big way, called hourly cost maintenance. And we've been able to diversify and grow the company over the past 32 years to the point now where we have a portfolio consisting of just over 10% of the entire turbine-powered business aviation fleet.
That's fantastic. I know that one of the main topics that we wanted to talk about today was sustainability and how JSSI is getting involved big time in the SAF movement for sustainable aviation fuels. How did JSSI get involved in the sustainable fuel movement?
Well, as our CEO Neil Book said, the European community has set the bar pretty high by saying they are going to be carbon neutral by 2050. So again, with the number of turbine airplanes that our clients fly each and every day, we burn a lot of jet fuel. So the concept here was we needed to step up, we needed to try and drive change and empower our clients to either burn SAF or be able to get the offset when they burn traditional Jet A.
So, what specifically is JSSI doing to support the widespread use of SAF?
Well, we have formed a partnership with Avfuel out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. Avfuel has been first and foremost in the early distribution of the SAF product. Now, we have airplanes flying in almost 80 different countries. Avfuel has over 3,000 locations to buy fuel. So it was a natural marriage for us to come together with Avfuel and have a product to make it really easy for our customers to A, know where they could buy SAF on a given day, or B, do an offset if they're burning traditional Jet A. And we do that through a very seamless partnership with Avfuel. The other thing we do through our Conklin and DeDecker consulting subsidiary is you can get on your JSSI customer portal and you can actually calculate your CO2 burn on a given flight on a given day. So we've got all the tools, Tom, to make it happen.
So tell me more about that carbon calculator and how folks can access that.
Well, as a JSSI client, every client has a customer portal within our website. And it's very, very simple. the type of airplane you're flying, where you're going to depart, and your location and your cruising altitude, and the app does the rest.
Okay, that's kind of exciting. And then also, you talked a little bit about carbon offsets. Could you give me a few details about how pilots can purchase carbon offsets as well?
Yes, Avfuel Corporation is set up to do a number of carbon offset purchases, and it would be, the main thing they're doing is things like planting trees. So through your customer portal, you would be directed to the appropriate people at Avfuel to make those arrangements.
All right, wonderful. Now, for folks who aren't really well versed in SAF, could you give us a little description about what SAF is and how it's produced? What's it made from?
Well, the first thing I'll tell you is what I've been told by a number of industry leaders, and I was just in a board meeting with the General Aviation Manufacturers Association a couple of weeks ago, and as our chairman Pete Bunce said, SAF is Jet A, it is Jet A, it is Jet A. He repeated himself 3 times. It's made to the same ASTM spec as Jet A, but it's made from different, it's blended, I should say, as opposed to refined, and it's done with different things like vegetable oil and organic products like that. There is no performance degradation on the airplane. It doesn't change the maintenance protocols on the airplane in any way, shape, or form, and the weight is roughly the same.
Lou, do you feel like the aviation community is on the verge of really making a difference when it comes to reducing carbon emissions?
Absolutely. I've been to a couple of conferences within the last 30 days, and of course, many of us were at NBAA in Las Vegas last week. And there is absolutely no doubt that the groundswell within the industry for SAF is there. It's front and center as the initiative in our industry right now.
Did you get a feel that more and more pilots are embracing SAF? What are some pilots
Absolutely.
what are pilots telling you?
Well, as a JSSI client, you have a couple of touch points. You have your JSSI tech advisor, which takes you through on maintenance issues. You also have a client services person. And what I'm hearing from our client services team is that we're getting more and more inquiries as to where to buy it, how do I get it, can I get it on every flight? So we're seeing it internally from our customer base that there is a sincere interest.
I know that some of the big challenges for the success of SAF is price point and scaling up production. How do you see those two issues playing out?
Well, I probably can't give you a real accurate forecast on production. I can tell you at this point it's available, but I'm not going to say you're not going to find it, I don't believe, at every FBO today. I from people I have spoken with, I've polled a number of end users, and I think there's some tolerance for some slightly higher pricing. I think people know it's the thing to do. I mean, all you hear today is climate change, and I think this is something that can avert some of the things going on with climate change. So I do believe people will absorb a slightly higher price.
I have to ask you, what's your personal view on SAF? I mean, did it take you a while to come around to it, or were you an immediate embracer of it right away?
I first heard about it at a conference in Van Nuys, California, about 3 years ago, when Avfuel brought out a truckload of SAF and put it in 3 different OEM airplanes, and they flew the airplanes in front of everybody. And I think that made us all a believer that this stuff does work. And I think probably I was lukewarm 3 years ago, but that certainly has changed. And I would promote it today with anybody.
That's fantastic. Okay, so let's remind everybody a couple of things about what we've been talking about here with SAF. There's a carbon calculator available, so pilots can figure out SAF details about using it with their particular aircraft. But there's also a program where pilots can get carbon offsets as far as purchasing those offsets if they're using fossil fuels.
Correct.
Those are two big issues, and I really appreciate you stopping by to share those details with us, Lou, today. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No problem, Tom. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Lou. And that's Lou Seno of JSSI that we've been speaking with. And I also wanted to thank you for watching. I'm Tom Patterson with Flying.